Sometimes when we're dealing with behaviors that are really difficult or challenging for us to cope with, it can be difficult to figure out what the trigger or the cause or the outcome may be. So today, I'm going to talk to you about the ABC analysis. Hello and welcome to the Able to Care podcast. I'm your host, Andy Baker, and today I'm going to be talking about what's called the ABC analysis, or the ABC charts. So ABC charts are often used in care settings to help carers or care providers or teachers to better understand why behaviours are occurring. So one of the principles as far as ABC is concerned is that all behavior is a form of communication. The person is telling us something. We need to try and understand why they're choosing this language rather than any other and what they're trying to say, what they're trying to achieve. The idea is, and I break it down into that basically an unmet need stimulates stress or stress creates an unmet need. And then behavior is a strategy this person uses to either meet that need, which is usually either to gain or avoid something or to cope with stress. Okay. Now, if those strategies don't work, then the person can go to what we call reflexes, which is the emotional reactions. Now, sometimes from one incident, though, it can be difficult to really discern why this, why now. So if a person acts out in a particular way, let's say that an individual just throws something across the room, it may be difficult to kind of discern, well, what did the staff say or do, or what was the thing that caused that behavior to happen, or what does this person want to happen as a result of that item being thrown across the room. And obviously, if they're verbal, we may need to talk to them. Now, always be careful. And I always kind of reiterate this, try and avoid the question why, because why tends to sometimes have a judgment associated against it. And 95% of what we do, we've got absolutely no idea why we do it. So sometimes why is a really difficult question to answer, and it can actually cause further agitation, shame deflection, and further emotional distress. So be careful of asking why. So better questions to the person, if they can communicate, is how are you feeling at the time? What were you hoping would happen from your actions, and what could we do differently next time, or what could have gone wrong? So a simple process of kind of being curious and exploratory rather than demanding as far as their justification is concerned can be better. But for individuals who may not understand their behavior or may not feel safe enough to be honest about their behavior, or may not be able to communicate why or what their reasoning or what they were feeling at the time, this is where ABC charts can come into play. What does ABC stand for? A is for antecedents, B is for behavior, and C is for consequences. So antecedents are basically the events that led up to the actual behavior itself. What happened just before the behavior? Now, we also sometimes have what's called slow stressors or setting stressors, which are things that setting events. For instance, like if I didn't sleep very well last night, it might impact how likely a behavior is to occur. If I skip breakfast, if there's a particular member of staff on shift. There's lots of reasons that are called setting events that aren't something that actually causes the bottle of Coke lid to blow, but there's something that's shaking it up in the background or increases the likelihood of it happening. So sometimes setting events should be recorded as well. But the ABC is, okay, what was happening just before the event? So who else was in the room? How would you describe the environment? What room were they in? What was said beforehand? And also, how was it said? What kind of communication did occur? So is there anything asked of the person or anything kind of been that they were doing at the particular time that this incident occurred? So we're looking for as much information. Now, when you are filling in an ABC chart, what I find a lot of staff sometimes do, or a lot of people do, is they immediately start making assumptions. So when I do this exercise, for instance, I sometimes show a video and then get staff to do an ABC on it. And the video I show is basically a lad and then two other people. And the two other people aren't really paying attention to this lad. They're just doing their thing. And people often write down in the antecedent, they were ignoring him. Now, that's not a statement of fact. That's an interpretation and a judgment. This is where straight away that could skew the perspective going, well, that must be the cause then. They were ignoring him and therefore that's why the behavior occurred. but that's us already starting to make assumptions. So a much better way of writing down the A is write down the facts only. What was person 1 doing? What was person 2 doing? And therefore, what was person 3 doing? And by writing down what everybody was doing, we can infer from that, well, they weren't paying him attention. If they were paying attention to that, they're automatically not paying attention to him. So we don't need to write they were ignoring, because that's a judgment call, that's an assumption. Whereas instead, we just write down what were they doing. Okay, so we write down the facts that we know, not our interpretation of the feelings. Now, feelings can be useful. Okay, when you're writing reports, some people write down facts, but feelings are useful. Just make sure that you make them clear that that is a feeling. I felt that maybe such and such was being ignored, not that's a fact. Okay, hopefully that makes sense to all of you watching or listening. In the A, we're looking for what led up immediately before the behavior. Then we move on to the B, which is the behavior, and we want to be explicit. We're not using phrases like such and such kicked off. He just got angry. Because what we're looking to do is make sure, again, we're wanting facts, because saying he's angry is an assumption based on what? Now, we might be justified in that assumption because based on his body language, his tone, the things he was saying would then indicate that he was angry. But write down the facts of what was going on. Such and such ran out the room, put themselves to the floor and proceeded to loudly verbalize and hit the head on the floor. Okay, not such and such had a meltdown. Okay, so we'd be specific because different behaviors may have different antecedents and different consequences, but we may lump them all into the same if we're not explicit in the information that we write down. So there's our B, the behavior. Now the last is consequences. What happened immediately after the behavior? And it's kind of then who did what? How did we interact? How do we engage? Did the person gain or lose anything they had before? Did we remove anything from them or from the situation, which could be people removed. It could be I was removed. So it could have been attention. So it could be non-tangible. Or it could be tangible, being we took that off them, or they were given this particular item to soothe. And what we're looking at there is, does this behavior seem to have some kind of function to it in the fact that there's something that triggers it, or there's something that they seem to be gaining or avoiding through this behavior? This is one way of potentially doing a bit of a detective mission to figure out why this particular behavior is occurring. Now, proviso. Within trauma-informed, you sometimes might find it very difficult that there doesn't seem to be a specific behavior, or there doesn't seem to be a specific A or C, because it may not be something from the present, it should be something from the past. And this is where understanding, so I'm still learning an awful lot about this, but if I give the example, if I'm working with somebody who's potentially experienced, let's say, domestic abuse, for instance, within their home, and then I just shout up the stairs, hey, tea's ready. Now, straight away, from us externally, we might not look at that as being a potential trigger because I'm only saying that tea's ready. I only raise my voice to say that tea's ready. But how are they feeling when somebody raises their voice? That might trigger their internal alarm based on previous trauma and history. It's a trigger. That's like going, it's only a little spider on a big one kind of thing. It's not for us to decide. And that can make this difficult. But using a combination of the ABC, we can start to see so what are they gaining or what are they avoiding from behavior, or what seems to be triggering it? So then we can start then looking from the proactive planning as part of my 6-stage target model from my book, Targeting the Positive, which is a case of the proactive plan. The proactive plan is, can I eliminate the stress or meet the need for them, or what skills do they need to learn or we need to help them with, or reasonable adjustments to help them to be able to do it themselves. Okay, so that's what we're looking at as far as then creating a plan. What seemed to trigger it? Well, can we remove that? Or do we need to take some better skills to be able to cope with it? What they're gaining from that behavior, again, can we teach them better skills to either meet their need or to cope with that stress? And we may sort of find that it's a short-term solution to meet the needs of cope with stress. And we've then got an ideal target over a period of time. So we work through a process of, hey, that's better than that. So let's just work towards that first, then go better, then go better, then go better. All the while, we're always doing this from a person-centered point of view, looking at what's the best interest of the individual themselves, not what we think is then their best interests. Okay, so we're looking again based on an individualized kind of process of care, not just what works for everybody else. Now, one of the things as far as an ABC chart and going into kind of slightly more complex things like function analysis is looking for patterns in these ABC charts. Sometimes from one incident, it can be difficult to kind of really gauge why did this happen. What we can do is sometimes a scatter plot chart, or sometimes there's quite complex forms that we can fill in, looking for patterns of kind of going, it always seems to be in this room. It always seems to be on this day. It always seems to be with this person. It always seems to be that happens as a result. So from the one incident, it can be difficult to look at what might be the trigger or might be the outcome. Where actually by looking at numerous ABC charts, we can then try and figure out to see what the pattern is and help this person to find other ways, adaptive ways of meeting their own needs or to coping with the world around them in a way that feels right for them. In summary, ABC charts are a simple yet powerful tool for understanding and addressing behaviours within care and education settings. And by breaking down all our incidents and behaviours into antecedents, behaviours and consequences, you can gain valuable insights to help you support those in your care more effectively. And I've used them numerous times in different environments. And if I give you a few examples, one was an elderly care setting where it seemed to be as a notice of a pattern as far as lunchtimes are concerned with this particular gentleman. And if he ate first, behaviours seemed to be better. But if he had to wait for his food, that's when we got a higher level of escalation. Now, this is in a dementia setting. So again, this is where we're looking at best interests. So should we punishing him and making him wait for his food, or recognize that this isn't necessarily going to change? He's obviously really hungry and he seems to struggle with everybody else getting fed first. So why don't we just feed him first? Straight away reduces our stress. We also found that it was the times that he didn't get any pudding that then we struggled more with his behavior in the afternoon. And he was a big guy, former rugby player, head injury induced dementia. And he was given the same kind of meal sizes as little Beryl, who weighed 10 stone next to him. Therefore, kind of really, it was no wonder, but it kind of took this ABC to kind of work it out. Another one I'll give you, which was a little bit more long-term, this was a lady in a care home whose behavior seemed to just deteriorate dramatically at certain points throughout the year. And we kind of ruled out certain cycles as far as circadian rhythms are concerned, and menstruation cycle and things like that. What it turned out to be is that it was when one particular member of staff went on holiday, but it wasn't a caregiver. It was actually a domestic. It was a cleaner. And all that used to happen was that cleaner in the morning used to pop in and say hello, then go about their shift and things like that. But a couple of days of them not coming and saying hello, this person's behavior changed. A few days after them coming back, before this person had settled back in and accepted them being there again. And that was difficult to pick out. Other examples could be a case of it always seems to happen on a Wednesday, and it was a young lady who's basically didn't like the meals that were created on Wednesday at school, so was going out without any food, but that wasn't being communicated back home. So straight away, as soon as the carers knew that, well, we'll send her a pack up on Wednesdays, or we'll make sure as soon as she comes in through the door, we put some food in her mouth. So straight away, just by doing a bit of a what's the pattern here, help them to recognize it. I've also seen it done where it can actually raise and improve kind of safeguarding that, hey, this kid seems to be an awful lot more difficult in the mornings on these particular days. Is there anything that's happening there? And it's when dad drops kid off at school, for instance. Now, it could be nothing malicious or negative. It could be dad takes a different route. Just the kid doesn't feel as safe with dad. So we might be able to put things in place to help those parents, but also the school to help that child when dads come in to go, okay, how can we prepare for this? When dad comes in, let's redirect the kid straight into a therapeutic activity rather than straight into the classroom to help the child to re-regulate, to get ready to cope with the day before we go pushing them straight into something that causes them stress. And this is where the importance of it should be person-centered all the time. So ABCs are an incredibly useful way of kind of analyzing behavior, better understanding the people that we work with. The last point I'd make as far as ABCs are concerned, and I've gone through all the kind of the looking for the negative attributes of behavior. When I'm working with parents and I'm working with foster parents particularly, but also across the board when I'm looking at behavioral planning, I always remind people, don't only do kind of ABCs as far as negative behaviors or what we perceive as maladaptive behaviors is concerned. I also want to be looking at adaptive behaviors, and this is a huge fundamental part of my targeting the positive book and our able target system model that we teach. Because sometimes I'll go in and go, well, this individual's had a meltdown Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Saturday and Sunday. So what are you going to do about it? And my first thing is then I really need to analyze Friday, because Friday's the only day it hasn't happened. So what's working on Friday that doesn't seem to be working any other day? And because we're so focused to spotting the behavior we don't want, we forget and can sometimes ignore or let it go past us the times that behavior doesn't occur. If I notice, for instance, around sensory processing, that when this kid sits upside down on the sofa, head down, feet up, he ends up sitting and watching the TV for about an hour and seems much more settled, as opposed to when he's sat normally where he's up and down and up and down and up and down. Well, straight away, the detective in me is going, something's going on there with his vestibular system, that he seems to be coping better by activating his vestibular system by being upside down. That seems to help him to be able to be more in sync and more regulated. So straight away, but I'd only notice that when the behavior I want is there, or on the behavior that I don't want is there. So I always encourage parents, whether you are going for any kind of support for your child, you're looking to better understand your child, don't just record what you don't want. Also notice the times they behave in ways that we think are adaptive and seem to improve their well-being, both emotional, psychological, and physical. Okay, don't forget about those bits as well. And we can do ABC for those exactly the same. I hope you found that useful. If you did, please like, comment, and share. But otherwise, thank you very much.